Welcome back, everybody, to our series on Sefer Bereishit. This week is Parashat Vayeshev, and we're going to enter and do a little detective work on the famous story of who sold Yosef. Of course, if we would ask Yosef, as he says in Parashat Vayigash, who sold him, he'll say his brother sold him. He says, "I'm Yosef, your brother, who you sold down to Egypt." But when we read the story in Parashat Vayeshev carefully, it could very well be that the brothers actually never sold him. That's going to be the opinion that Rashbam and Chizkuni suggest. I'd like to do a little careful read of Parashat Vayeshev with a little discussion of geography of the time, and we'll try to support those opinions and see how it affects the rest of the stories in Sefer Bereishit, and explains a lot of question marks that will make the story make a lot more sense. So, of course, Yosef has his famous two dreams. We'll discuss those dreams in a later share, but those dreams cause the brothers to hate Yosef, and then the brothers are watching Yaakov's sheep. Remember, Yaakov came back from Lavan with a lot of sheep. They're looking for grazing land. They don't seem to get along so well with their father, and they're going up north to Shechem to take care of the sheep, which means, because the family's living in Hebron, the brothers don't come every day, not even every week probably. They'll come home at the end of the season, but they're gone for several weeks for sure. Watching the sheep up north, Yosef is home with his father, and Yosef is sent by his father to go check on his brothers to see how the sheep are doing, how the brothers are doing, and he's supposed to report back. Now, Yaakov and family are living in Hebron. The brothers are farther north in Shechem, and it's at least a 3-day walk, especially with sheep, probably even more, to go from Hebron to Shechem. Therefore, when Yosef leaves, he's leaving for at least several days, if not at least a week, until he'd come back home and report to his father. Sure enough, Yosef arrives in Shechem, doesn't find his brothers. Someone tells him they're farther north in Dotan, which is the area of Jenin today. They're farther north of Shechem, even farther away from home. And the brothers see him from a distance. And before he actually makes it to his brothers, we find the first plotting, because as soon as they see him from a distance, they plot, let's kill the guy. That's going to be in Pasuk Yud Tet, the brothers planned. They see him from a distance, and they say, "V'amru ish al achiv, hinei ba lachalmot elezabah." Here comes the dreamer. V'ata luchu min hargeu. The original plan, let's kill him. That's first-degree murder. V'nashlichehu be'echad haborot, who take the body, the carcass, that after we kill the person, and hide him in any old pit. V'yamarnu, and we're going to say, we'll talk about this in a minute, haya rachalatu, a wild animal must have eaten him. And now we'll see what will happen to his dreams. What's the brothers' original plan? They're going to commit first-degree murder, and they're going to hide the body, and a couple weeks later when they get home, they're not going to say anything to the father when they get home. Rather, they're going to come home, and the father's going to say, "Where's Yosef?" And they're going to say, "We don't know." And the father's going to say, "I sent him to look for you." And they're going to say, "We never saw him." And then they're going to suggest what must have happened. If we didn't see him and you sent him, he must have been eaten by a wild animal. And basically, they plan to put the blame on their father. You sent that young 17-year-old boy on his own from Hebron to Shechem. It's dangerous. And therefore, not only are they killing his brother, they're trying to put the blame on their father, which I think is a very terrible plan. But of course, they never actually do that. As we'll see, the plan changes. Because even though right away they want to kill the guy, they're always going to be reluctant about committing murder, as we'll see in the next line. Now Reuven gets involved. In Pasuk Chaf Aleph, Vayishma Reuven v'yatzileu miyadam. Reuven hears the plan and plans to save himself and save his brother. Vayomer lo nakenu nefesh. Reuven has an official plan, not his real plan. His official plan is, let's not commit first-degree murder. Rather, we call that grumar, or we're going to cause him to die. We're not going to actually kill the person. Let's throw him in an empty pit. And Reuven has a great idea of what pit to throw him in. We'll see in a minute. In the desert, in Midbar Yehuda, or in the wilderness. And he'll die on his own. And therefore, we can actually commit murder. It'll be easier sort of to daven mincha afterwards if they don't actually commit murder. Of course, we have to get rid of him because he's a danger to the family because of his dreams. V'yomer alem Reuven, the official plan, Reuven tells him, Al tishpechu dam, let's not commit murder. That's one of the Noachite laws. Instead, hashlichu oto el habor hazeh asher bamidbar. I know a great pit in the desert. Now, if you know the geography of Israel, Jenin, or Dotan, is along the mountain range, like the cities of Shechem and in the cities of Hebron and Gush Etzion and Beitel, etc. And along the mountain range, a little bit to the east, 2-3 kilometers to the east, we have what's called Midbar Yehuda. Because as you go towards the Jordan Valley, there's much less rain. Therefore, we can't grow trees there, but you can graze your sheep there. Therefore, there's the Midbar, where shepherds watch their sheep, but the people are living on the mountain range itself, several kilometers to the west on top of the mountain range. But it's a place, I know, in the desert where there's a pit, we'll say that's empty, has no water, therefore no one will find him there. And we'll throw him in that pit. He won't survive because there's no water in the pit. No one will find him because it's in the Midbar. And he'll die on his own. And that way, we didn't commit murder, he died on his own. So that's the official plan, so they won't have to actually commit murder. But what's Reuven's real plan? Reuven's real plan is to come back later to the pit, take Yosef out, free him, let him go back home. And Reuven has two things to gain. Number one, he's saving his brothers from committing a terrible sin. And also, when Yosef comes home and says, listen, the brothers tried to kill me, and Reuven came and saved me, Reuven will get sort of bonus points and maybe get his Bechorah, his right to being the firstborn. He might get that back after the event that happened in last week's Parsha with Bilhah. So Reuven has an official plan that the brothers agree to, and he has a real plan to go back and save his brother later on. So keep that plan in mind, and we'll see as the story develops. So the brothers agree to his plan, and when Yosef comes, they take his coat off. That was a sign of their hatred. And they take him in Pasach Avdalad, Vaikachuhu. They take Yosef, Yashlichu oto habora, Vaborek im b'mayim. They throw him into that big pit. The pit's very deep. There's no water in it. And therefore, within a day or two, or maybe 3, he'll die from starvation and thirst. Okay. Now, Pasach Hafei is the key to the story. After they throw him in the pit, it says, Vayishvu lechol lachem. They sit down to eat bread, which means they sit down to a meal. And there's two possibilities. Either they're sitting down to eat a meal right next to the pit, watching him, to make sure he doesn't get out of the pit, maybe listening to him screaming, which doesn't make sense because if they're going to wait by the pit until he dies, Reuven's plan makes no sense. It makes a lot more sense that after throwing Yosef into the pit, they go back to their camp in Dotan and sit down to a meal where all their food is and where all their supplies are. So it would make a lot more sense that they're eating away from the pit, but keep both possibilities in mind. Either the brothers eating by the pit, and then the question is, why does Reuven disappear? Or all the brothers, including Reuven, are away from the pit, and I'm going to follow that direction because it makes a lot more sense. Reuven's plan simply doesn't make sense if the brothers plan to stay by the pit until he dies. His whole plan is based on they're going to go back to their camp in Dotan, and Reuven will come back later in the day or in the evening and save him. So let's follow the assumption that they're sitting away from the pit. Vayishvu lechol lachem. They're sitting down, and now geography becomes important. As they're sitting down to the meal, up in the mountain range, in Dotan, that's the Shomron Mountains, Hayab, what do they see? Vaysu enehem vayiru, but they lift up their eyes, and what do they see? We're now in Pasuk, I'll find it in a second, in Pasuk, in the middle of Chafei. They lift up their eyes and they see, V'nei orchat Yishmaelim ba min Gilad. There is a caravan of Yishmaelites coming down from the Gilad. The Gilad is in Jordan today. It's a mountain range on the other side of the Jordan Valley, on the eastern side of the Jordan Valley. It's part of an ancient trade route where Yishmaelite caravanners would travel from the eastern side of the Jordan and even farther from Mesopotamia. They travel through the land of Canaan on the way down to Egypt. Good old supply and demand. The people in this area have goods to sell. The market, there's a great demand in Egypt for the goods in the area of Canaan and Transjordan as well. And therefore, they would carry the goods of the people in this area and sell them down in Egypt. They would carry the supplies and take care of all the business transactions. Again, Orchat Yishmaelim is a set of caravanners. They see them coming down from a distance, and they're on their way down to Egypt to sell the different spices and things in the Egyptian market. And therefore, Yehuda has a great idea. Remember, no one wants to kill Yosef, but they want to get rid of him. So what does Yosef say? What does Yehuda say? So we see that the plan is for him to die in the pit. It says, what do we gain by being responsible for his death and covering up his blood? Instead, let's sell him. We'll make some money on the deal. We didn't commit murder, but we got the same goal. We got rid of him. Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. V'yadenu at yabo, we didn't commit murder at all. Okay, ki achinu b'sarenu, he's still our brother, and his brothers agree. Now, if Reuven isn't there, the question is, where did he go? If Reuven is there, what would he do? Reuven can't disagree with the plan because that would blow his cover. So if Reuven is sitting with the brothers at the mill, and Yehuda makes this plan, let's sell him instead of letting him die in the pit, Reuven can't disagree. The most logical thing for Reuven to do if he's with his brothers would be to volunteer. I'll be the first one to the pit, because it was my idea to put him there. I'll pull him out and help begin the sale. Now, what you have to take into consideration is that the caravanners are not traveling through the desert. They're not traveling through Midbar, through the desert where the pit is. Instead, they're going through Emek Yisrael, which is about maybe 10 kilometers north of Dotan. It's the ancient trade route, goes down from the Gilad through the Beit Shan Valley, goes through Emek Yisrael, the area of Afula today, passes Megiddo, and goes down the coastal line called the Via Maris, the ancient trade route along the coastal plain, on the way down to Egypt through the Sinai. And therefore, it's going to take about an hour or two at least until the caravanners on the way down from the Gilad are going to be passing by Emek Yisrael, which is about a half-hour walk to the north. What will the brothers need to do? They'll need to take Yosef out of the pit, bring him, take about a 15, 20, maybe 30-minute walk to the main highway in Emek Yisrael, and then sell him to the caravanners who are on their way there, and meet him at the pass pretty much. They have plenty of time, because again, they're coming down from the Gilad, that's where their caravanners are, and they have time to finish eating, and then take Yosef out of the pit. But it would make most sense for Reuven to volunteer to fetch him from the pit and bring him to the brothers so they can take him to sell him. So let's see what happens. Pasach Chavchet. What does Chumash tell us? Vayavru anashim midyanim socharim. All of a sudden, another group of people appear in the story. A group of Midianite merchants. A socher is a merchant, or peddlers. What are the Midyanim doing? They're sort of gypsy-type people. They're merchants. They sell their goods. Most likely, they're also on their way to meet this caravan of Yishmaelim, selling their goods. And by chance, or what we call hashgacha pratit, just by chance, what happens? A group of Midianite merchants pass by. They must have heard Yosef screaming from the pit. No one else is there. Vayimshechu, if we follow the Hebrew, the Midianites, they pull Yosef out of the pit. Vayilu et Yosef min habor, vayimkru et Yosef leishmelim besrim kasef, vayilu et Yosef mitzrayma. The Midianim pull him out of the pit. They sell him to the Ishmaelim for 20 shekel. In the meantime, the brothers are still eating. Now, if my theory is correct, Reuven should have volunteered to go to the pit first. And look what happens. Vayeshev Reuven halabor. Reuven returns to the pit, and what happens? Vinei and Yosef babor. Yosef's not there. Why? Not because the brothers told him already. Reuven is the first brother to go to the pit. We'll prove why in a minute. But he's not in the pit because the Midianim took him. But Reuven doesn't know what happened. They're aghast. What happened to him? He rips his clothing. He doesn't know what to do now. His whole plan is ruined. Now, Pasuk Lamed is the key to proving this point. Why? Look carefully what it says now in Pasuk Lamed. Vayeshev elachav. Look at Pasuk Chavtet and Pasuk Lamed. Vayeshev Reuven halabor. Reuven returns to the pit. Yosef's not in the pit. Then Vayeshev elachav. He returns to his brothers. That proves that the brothers are away from the pit with Reuven. Reuven leaves the brothers, goes to the pit, realizes Yosef isn't there, and he returns to his brothers. And what does he say? Vayomer hayeled eineno, vani anani ba. The young boy, he's gone, and what's going to be with me now? Because, of course, if he's gone, everyone would put the blame on Reuven. It was Reuven's idea to put him in the pit. Now, the brothers don't say back, hey, we sold him. They don't say anything. What do? They don't know what to do. Because if he got home, I guess they'll find out sooner or later if he got home. But if he didn't get home, he's a missing person. They're going to come home. They don't know what happened. The original plan was they would know he was dead, and they'd try to convince the father that it was his fault that he died. Now they themselves don't know what happened. But now they're afraid if they come home and they tell their father, no, they didn't sell Yosef, but they don't know what happened. The father's going to find out the whole story, and he's going to send them on what? On search. He's going to make them look for Yosef everywhere. The father won't be able to get over it. He'll be a missing person, and it'll be impossible for his father to continue living. They need closure to convince their father that Yosef is actually dead, so they stop looking for him and they can pretty close him out of the family. So what do? They take Yosef's coat that they took off of him before. They shecht a goat, remember that line, and they dip Yosef's coat in the blood of the goat. They send the coat to the father. I don't think they bring it because they can't ask their father, do you recognize this? Of course he recognized it. They send it with somebody else to Hebron, going door to door. They get to Yaakov's house and they ask Yaakov, do you recognize this coat? And what does Yaakov tell them? And what does Yaakov say? Back here he recognizes. Now Yaakov himself says, hey, this is my son's coat. He reaches the conclusion on his own. He must have been eaten by a wild animal. Toraf Yosef. Yosef was eaten up by an animal. Yaakov rips his clothes. He's in Avilut. He's in mourning now. He can't get over it for many times. The brothers and all of his children come to try to tell Yaakov to get over it, but he doesn't get over it. And we know the rest of the story, that Yaakov now is depressed the rest of his life because he doesn't know what happened to Yosef and he thinks that he's dead. Now, if that's the case, the brothers don't know what happened to him. He never comes home. They must assume he must have died as well. No one ever dreamt that he was sold. Probably they also think a wild animal hit him, or maybe ate him. But in the eyes of the brothers, they have no idea what happened. I want to bring a proof of that, because when the brothers later come to Egypt for food, and Yosef accuses them of being spies, he interrogates them. And that's why he says, how many brothers are you? They can't, under interrogation, they can't lie. Where do they say under interrogation? We were 12 brothers. Remember, the cover story is, we aren't spies, we're brothers. The interrogators ask questions, each one separately. How many brothers are you? Remember? And where do they say? We're 12 brothers. One's home with his father, Binyamin. One's missing. They don't say he was sold or he was killed. He says he's missing. That's all they know. And they can't lie under interrogation. And therefore, the brothers say, Eneno. Later on, when Yosef, actually it was earlier, when Yosef is in jail with the butler and the baker, what did he tell them? I was stolen from Eretz HaIvrim. Ki gunuv gunafti. Which means, what does Yosef think? I don't think Yosef ever thought the brothers planned on killing him. Rather, I think Yosef thought the brothers were teasing him. What happened? The brother comes. He knows they don't like him. He comes. They take him. They throw him in a pit. Yosef is assuming they're just teasing him for an hour or two, and they'll come back within an hour or two and take him out. Teach him a lesson not to do that again and send him back home. But I don't think Yosef ever entertained the thought that the brothers wanted him dead. He didn't think they would leave him there forever to die. He was assuming they'd come back and get him and just teach him a lesson. In the meantime, what happened? By chance, the Midianites came by, and they stole him from the pit. They must have heard him screaming. And therefore, what does he tell the butler and the baker? Ki gunuv kunafti, I was stolen from the land of the Ivrim. I was stolen from Canaan by Midianites. Now, who's to blame for Yosef being stolen? That's the brothers. For Yosef, I'm Yosef, your brother. You caused me to be sold to Egypt. That's the way Chizkuni explains the pasuk later on. It's your fault. But Yosef never realized that the brothers wanted to kill him. And that explains basically Yosef's behavior. Yosef never thought that the brothers really wanted to kill him. He thought he was stolen. And the brothers have no idea what happened. And it puts a lot more drama into the story. But the nice part about the story is the brothers actually never did anything wrong to Yosef. I don't think they actually would have ever killed him, or they would have actually sold him, because they always have regret step by step. But they were thinking about it, they were planning it, and Hashkacha had it, God's providence had it, that it happened anyhow. And that's the understanding of the story of Yosef and his brothers. Now, in light of that, a lot of the details of the stories later on make sense. Why Yosef says, I was stolen, why the brothers say, Eneno, he's not there, and why they're so aghast when all these things happen like 20 years later, when they start getting when all these things happen in Egypt, until Yosef tells them, I'm Yosef, your brother. What I want to conclude with is the Haftarah, because everyone asks a question. In the Haftarah, what does it say? We read from Amos, all 3 sins of Yisrael, and the 4th one, God won't forgive them. But Al Michram B'Ketzab Tzadik. So the reason we read the Haftarah from Amos in Perek Bet, because one of the sins of Israel, they sold a righteous man for money. Now, when you read Amos carefully, especially in Perek Het, he says explicitly, he's talking about the people of their own generation. Amos is talking to the people in the northern kingdom before Ashur comes and takes over, explaining why God is so angry for their corrupt behavior of how they're treating poor people and taking advantage of them. They're not talking about Yosef and his brother. Am Yisrael is being punished for their own sins by the Assyrians later on in the end of the First Temple period in the Northern Kingdom, not because the brothers sold Yosef, but they're acting in a way that's similar to the brothers. Basically, they're acting in an immoral manner. And the Navi is sort of alluding maybe to the story of Yosef and his brothers, but not claiming that they're being punished for the sin of Yosef and his brothers. So that's the overall picture. So again, we can't prove for sure because we don't know exactly what happened. But when we take all those points into consideration and the geography, it makes a lot more sense that the brothers never sold Yosef. It explains a lot of the details in the story, puts drama into the story, and the deeper idea behind it is that be careful what you even think about doing. You talk about killing him, you talk about doing bad things, and even though you actually never did it, you're responsible. I'll just conclude with the famous midrash that Yosef sends Agalot to his father to bring him back 20 years later, coming down to Egypt. And Chazal say, Yaakov recognized it must be Yosef because the last thing they were learning was Egla Rufa. That was the last thing they were learning. If you remember, Egla Rufa is a law in Sefer Devarim when the leaders of a community take responsibility for murder that they didn't commit, but they have to say, even though they didn't commit the murder, they're responsible. Remember, Yadenu lo shafchu et hadam hazeh. The wording is very similar to the story here, but the idea behind it is that Jewish leadership, even if they didn't commit murder, if something terrible happens in their society, they're responsible for it, and therefore taking that responsibility, leadership taking responsibility of bad deeds in their society, that is the deeper message of Egla Rufa, and maybe the deeper message of the story of Yosef and his brothers. Everyone should have a wonderful week.